What would you do if a plane that vanished decades ago suddenly appeared in front of you, perfectly intact? No warning, no explanation, just a ghost from the past landing like nothing ever happened. This isn't some forgotten movie plot. It's a story that has been told for years as one of the most disturbing mysteries in aviation history. A commercial flight filled with passengers, gone without a trace. And then, almost 4 decades later, it comes back. Same aircraft, same crew, same flight number. But to them, no time had passed. At first, it sounds impossible, the kind of story you dismiss instantly. But the deeper you go, the harder it becomes to ignore. Because something about it feels real. And that's exactly what makes it dangerous. Because what you're about to hear fooled millions of people. And it might fool you too. It started like any other morning, July 2nd, 1955. A commercial flight prepares to leave New York, heading toward Miami. A short trip, just a few hours in the air. Nothing unusual, nothing risky. Passengers settle into their seats. Some flip through newspapers, others relax, expecting a smooth, uneventful journey. Back then, flying still carried a sense of calm. No rush, no tension, just the quiet hum of engines waiting to take off. On the ground, everything checks out. The aircraft is in perfect condition. The weather is clear. Visibility is ideal. There's no reason to worry. At 9:55 a.m., the plane accelerates down the runway and lifts into the sky. Inside the cockpit, communication is steady. The pilot confirms altitude, direction, speed. Everything is exactly as it should be. No turbulence, no strange signals, no warning signs. Just a routine flight, following a familiar path. But sometimes the most ordinary moments are the ones right before something goes terribly wrong. And this time, there would be no warning at all. 3. The disappearance with no explanation. Then, without warning, it's gone. One moment, the aircraft is visible on radar, moving exactly as expected. The next, it disappears. No distress call, no signal loss beforehand, no sudden weather change. Just gone. At first, the controllers think it's a glitch, a brief system error. It happens. They check the equipment, reset connections, scan again. Everything is working perfectly. Except for one thing. The plane is no longer there. They call out over the radio, again and again, trying to reach the pilot. Nothing. Silence fills the frequency. Within minutes, confusion turns into urgency, and urgency turns into panic. Because in aviation, when a plane disappears like that, it usually means the worst. Emergency protocols activate immediately. Search and rescue teams are deployed, military units are alerted. Aircraft and ships begin scanning vast areas of the Atlantic. They calculate the last known position and start looking for any sign of impact. Hours pass, then days, then weeks, and they find nothing. No wreckage, no fuel traces, no debris floating on the surface. It's as if the plane didn't crash. It just vanished. Eventually, the search is called off. The case is closed. Official conclusion: the aircraft went down, and everyone on board is presumed gone. 37 years pass. The story fades. The files collect dust. For most people, it's nothing more than a forgotten tragedy. Until one day, it comes back. May 21st, 1992. At an airport in Caracas, air traffic controllers go about their routine, monitoring flights, checking schedules. Nothing out of the ordinary. Then, suddenly, a new signal appears on the radar. No warning, no registration, no flight plan. It wasn't approaching. It just showed up. At first, they assume it's a system error, a glitch, something technical. But the signal doesn't disappear. It stays. And it's moving. One of the controllers stands up, grabs a pair of binoculars, and looks toward the horizon. There's something there. A small shape in the distance, getting closer. As it approaches, the confusion turns into disbelief. Because this isn't a modern aircraft. It's not a jet, not cargo, not military. It's something else entirely. A 4-engine propeller plane. Old, outdated, completely out of place in the 1990s. And then it hits them. They recognize the model. A Douglas DC-4. An aircraft that should have been retired decades ago. Now flying straight toward them. Like it never left. And that's when the situation stops being strange and starts becoming impossible. The tower doesn't hesitate. If that aircraft is real, they need to establish contact immediately. One of the controllers grabs the radio and calls out. No response. He tries again. Clear instructions. Standard procedure. Still nothing. For a moment, it feels like they're talking to something that shouldn't even be there. Then, a voice cuts through the static. Calm, professional, completely unaware of what's happening. The pilot responds. He identifies the aircraft, gives the flight number, and states his route. New York to Miami. Everything sounds normal until you realize what he just said. Because that flight shouldn't exist anymore. The controller freezes for a second, then asks a simple question. Confirm your current date. There's a pause. The pilot answers without hesitation. July 2nd, 1955. The room goes silent. No one moves, no one speaks. They're listening to a man who believes he's still in the past. The controller swallows, then replies with something that changes everything. This is Caracas. Today is May 21st, 1992. At first, nothing. Then the pilot comes back on the radio. But his voice is different now. Despite the confusion, the aircraft keeps descending. No sudden turns, no erratic movement. Just a steady approach, like everything is still under control. From the ground, every eye is locked on it. No one knows what condition it's in, or what they're about to witness. The wheels come down. Seconds later, they touch the runway. A hard landing, but stable. After nearly 4 decades missing, the plane has just landed, like it never left. For a brief moment, there's relief. Maybe now, they'll finally get answers. Ground crews move closer, cautiously. No one rushes in. They don't know if it's safe. They don't know what or who is inside. Then, the door opens, and the captain appears. Uniform clean, posture firm. But his face says everything. He's not relieved. He's terrified. His eyes scan the airport, the planes, the vehicles. After something like that, the human mind refuses to accept silence. If the plane really existed, if it really reappeared, if people really spoke to a pilot from another time, then there has to be an explanation. And the most popular one appears almost immediately. Time travel. or more specifically, a rupture in space-time. A phenomenon where reality itself bends in on itself, allowing something to slip from one moment into another. It sounds like science fiction, but it's not entirely dismissed in theoretical physics. Ideas connected to Einstein's relativity suggest that space and time aren't fixed, they're flexible, and in certain extreme conditions, they could theoretically fold. This is where the concept of a wormhole comes in, a shortcut through space-time, a bridge between two distant points in reality. In simple terms, imagine a sheet of paper, two dots far apart on its surface. Normally, you'd have to travel across the entire distance to go from one to the other. But if you bend the paper and connect...
At first glance, the case feels airtight. A missing plane, a sudden return, a confused crew, a second disappearance. It sounds structured, almost too perfect. But when investigators actually start digging into the details, the cracks begin to show almost immediately. First problem, the flight itself. There is no official record of a Pan Am Flight 914 operating the New York to Miami route in 1955. Not in airline archives, not in aviation databases, not in government records. A commercial flight carrying dozens of passengers doesn't simply vanish from history like it never existed. But that's only the beginning. The aircraft model also raises questions. The Douglas DC-4 mentioned in the story had already been largely phased out of that type of commercial service by that time period. In other words, the technical details don't align with real aviation history. Then comes the biggest issue: the people. The supposed air traffic controller who witnessed the event in 1992 doesn't appear in any official employment records. No documentation, no interviews, no confirmation that he ever worked at that airport. It's as if the central witness of the story never existed at all. And once researchers start checking images linked to the story, things get even more unstable. Photos that circulate online are either heavily edited or taken from unrelated aviation sources. Nothing can be traced back to a real documented event. And that's when the question changes. Because it's no longer what happened to the plane. It becomes, where did this story actually come from? When you trace the story far enough back, the mystery starts to unravel completely. There's no classified aviation report, no hidden military file, no forgotten government archive. The first known appearance of the Pan Am 914 story doesn't come from official history at all. It comes from a tabloid, a publication known for sensational headlines and fictional true stories designed to shock readers rather than document reality. Back in the 1980s, this type of media thrived on impossible narratives, stories about aliens, miraculous events, and bizarre disappearances that were never backed by evidence. And the Pan Am 914 story fits that pattern perfectly. It appears fully formed: the disappearance, the time jump, the return decades later. No documents, no sources, no verifiable data. Just a complete narrative built to feel real. And that's exactly why it spread. Because once a story is structured well enough, people don't always ask where it came from. They ask how it could be true. Later on, the story was repeated, reshaped, and republished in different formats. Each version added small details, different years, slightly changed passenger numbers, new dramatic elements. Over time, the line between fiction and shared memory started to blur. Then the internet arrived, and everything accelerated. Forums, blogs, early video platforms, each one helped the story evolve further. People began presenting it as a real mystery. Others added fake evidence to support it. And without a single original verified source to challenge it, the story spread unchecked. But when researchers eventually went back to the facts, the conclusion was unavoidable. There was no missing flight, no time anomaly, no documented event in Caracas. Even after the facts are laid out,
something about the story still lingers. Because the most interesting part of the Pan Am 914 case isn't the plane itself. It's how easily the human mind accepts it. This story didn't spread because it was proven. It spread because it felt like it could be. A missing aircraft, a jump through time, a return decades later. It hits every psychological trigger at once: mystery, nostalgia, and the fear of the unknown. And once those emotions are activated, logic takes a step back. Our memory doesn't store information like a database. It stores impressions, feelings, images, fragments of stories we hear repeated over time. And when something is repeated enough, even without evidence, it starts to feel familiar. Familiarity is powerful because the brain often confuses "I've heard this before" with "this must be true." That's how stories like this survive, not through proof, but through repetition. And in the age of the internet, repetition moves faster than verification. One video becomes 10, 10 becomes 100, and soon millions of people have heard the same story from different sources, each one slightly altered, but emotionally identical. At that point, the truth becomes irrelevant to perception, because people don't remember where they heard it.
They just remember the feeling it gave them. And that's the real lesson behind this mystery. Not that planes can disappear into time, but that stories don't need to be real to feel real. They only need to connect. And once they do, they stop being questioned.